Is it more important to have privacy or security?
I firmly believe that security is more important than privacy. In today's world, we're constantly connected to the internet and vulnerable to cyber threats from all directions. With great connectivity comes great risk, and I think it's naive to assume that our personal information will always be safe online. Think about it. When you walk down a busy street or enter a public place, do you worry about someone stealing your wallet? No, because there are laws in place to protect us physically. But what happens when someone hacks into your computer or steals your identity online? The consequences can be just as severe, but without adequate safeguards, people often feel powerless against these digital predators. That doesn't mean I'm advocating for complete surveillance states where everyone's private life is monitored 24/7. However, I do believe that certain measures like facial recognition technology, data encryption standards, and robust cybersecurity protocols should become the norm if we want to stay ahead of malicious actors who would exploit vulnerabilities for their own gain. In my opinion, sacrificing some degree of anonymity and seclusion in exchange for enhanced protection against real-world dangers makes perfect sense.
While I understand my opponent's concern about cybersecurity threats, I believe privacy is more important than security in our digital age. Privacy protects individuals from unwarranted intrusion into their personal lives and data, which can have profound implications for freedom of thought and action. Privacy fosters a sense of individual autonomy that is essential to human dignity and flourishing. Without the assurance that one's actions are not under constant surveillance or scrutiny by others, whether governments, corporations, or criminals, people may feel compelled to self-censor their behaviors online out of fear of retribution, stigma, or misuse of information. This chilling effect on free speech can have far-reaching negative consequences for democracy and social progress. Moreover, while security measures like robust encryption standards are crucial in protecting us from cyber threats, they often rely heavily upon the underlying principle that personal data should remain private to begin with. If individuals lose control over their own digital identities due to pervasive monitoring by third parties, even strong technical safeguards might prove insufficient against misuse or manipulation of this information for nefarious purposes. In sum, while both privacy and security are vital components in navigating our increasingly interconnected world safely and freely online, prioritizing robust protections around personal data as a fundamental right helps ensure that we retain agency over how it is used rather than simply reacting to potential threats once vulnerabilities have been exploited.
I see my opponent is prioritizing the importance of individual autonomy and freedom from unwarranted intrusion. While those are certainly valuable aspects of human dignity, I still firmly believe that security trumps privacy in today's digital landscape. My opponent claims that without adequate protection for their personal data, people may feel compelled to self-censor online out of fear of retribution or misuse. But isn't it more likely that this kind of behavior will be driven by a lack of awareness about cybersecurity best practices rather than an overbearing surveillance state? We can educate individuals on how to safeguard themselves against cyber threats just as we do with physical safety tips, like locking doors or not walking alone at night. Moreover, what exactly does unwarranted intrusion mean when our private lives are already being shared voluntarily through social media platforms, public records databases, and even wearable devices? It seems to me that most people aren't really concerned about government snooping so much as they're worried about losing control over who gets access to their information after sharing it willingly online. That's a different issue altogether, one where education around consent and data management would go further towards protecting us than blanket assertions about the dangers of surveillance states.
While I appreciate my opponent's suggestion that educating individuals on cybersecurity best practices can mitigate risks online, this approach falls short in addressing the broader implications of privacy violations and self-censorship driven by surveillance fears. Educating people is undoubtedly important but doesn't fully address the systemic issues at play. Firstly, even with extensive education, many individuals still fall victim to sophisticated cyber attacks due to human error or unforeseen vulnerabilities. The complexity and evolving nature of digital threats mean that no amount of personal vigilance can guarantee absolute protection against all forms of cybercrime. This inherent risk continues to undermine the trust needed for open dialogue online. Secondly, pervasive surveillance by governments and corporations creates a chilling effect on free speech that goes beyond mere cybersecurity awareness. It introduces an environment where individuals are constantly aware they could be monitored or penalized for their expressions, leading them to avoid discussions of sensitive topics altogether. This curtails meaningful discourse crucial for democratic societies, stifling innovation and critical thinking in public spaces. Furthermore, the data collected through surveillance is not just about safeguarding against threats but often serves broader purposes such as targeted advertising, political influence operations, or even oppressive governance tactics. Privacy protections serve to limit these abuses by ensuring individuals retain control over their personal information and how it's used across various platforms and services. In essence, while cybersecurity education plays a critical role in protecting individual data integrity from external threats, prioritizing comprehensive privacy safeguards remains essential for preserving the freedoms necessary for democratic engagement and societal progress.
I understand my opponent's concerns about the limitations of educating individuals on cybersecurity best practices, but I still firmly believe that security trumps privacy in today's digital landscape. While it's true that no amount of personal vigilance can guarantee absolute protection against all forms of cybercrime, this doesn't mean we should abandon efforts to educate people and instead rely solely on government or corporate solutions. My opponent seems to be suggesting that because some individuals will inevitably fall victim to sophisticated attacks despite education, we must prioritize their right to anonymity over collective safety. But what about those who are not so unlucky? Shouldn't they have a say in how their private information is protected online? Moreover, isn't it possible for governments and corporations to implement robust safeguards without sacrificing individual freedom entirely? We're not talking about blanket surveillance states here. Rather, targeted measures like secure data storage protocols, two-factor authentication requirements, and regular system updates could go a long way toward mitigating risks while preserving our right to connect with others securely online. It's also worth noting that many countries already require businesses handling sensitive customer data to adhere to strict standards. Think HIPAA in the US or GDPR in Europe. These regulations demonstrate that balancing security needs with individual rights is achievable when there's a clear understanding of what constitutes reasonable protections versus unwarranted intrusion.
While my opponent raises valid points about education and collective safety, I maintain that prioritizing privacy is crucial for a balanced approach to security in our digital age. The argument that because some individuals are at risk of cyber attacks we should focus solely on educating them overlooks the systemic impacts of pervasive surveillance. Firstly, the reliance on individual vigilance as the sole solution undermines broader societal benefits derived from robust privacy protections. Privacy ensures not just personal data protection but also fosters an environment where people can engage freely without fear of retribution or misuse of their information. This is essential for democratic discourse and social progress. Educating individuals about cybersecurity is important, but it should complement a framework that values individual autonomy rather than be the sole safeguard. Secondly, my argument extends beyond just protecting those who might fall victim to attacks. It's about preventing widespread chilling effects on free speech and behavior online. When people feel surveilled constantly by governments or corporations, they self-censor out of fear of repercussions, whether real or perceived. This can have far-reaching negative consequences for democratic participation and innovation. Moreover, the assurance that one's actions are not under constant scrutiny is foundational to human dignity and flourishing. Privacy provides a space where individuals can explore their thoughts freely without external judgment or manipulation by those with vested interests in controlling information flows. This intrinsic value of privacy cannot be overstated in its role for personal growth and societal well-being. Finally, while my opponent suggests focusing on collective safety as paramount, this approach often leads to overreach by governments and corporations that can exploit surveillance powers under the guise of security. Ensuring robust privacy protections helps balance these interests without sacrificing individual freedoms unnecessarily. In summary, While both education and security measures are important components in protecting individuals online, prioritizing comprehensive privacy safeguards remains essential for preserving human dignity, fostering free speech, and ensuring democratic progress in our interconnected world.
I see my opponent is still trying to downplay the risks associated with online activities, but I firmly believe that security trumps privacy in today's digital landscape. While it's true that robust privacy protections can foster an environment where people feel comfortable engaging freely without fear of retribution or misuse, this doesn't mean we should prioritize anonymity over collective safety. My opponent claims that individual vigilance undermines broader societal benefits derived from robust privacy protections. But isn't it possible for us to have both? We don't need to choose between educating individuals on cybersecurity best practices and implementing systemic safeguards like secure data storage protocols and regular system updates. In fact, these measures complement each other perfectly. Education empowers users to make informed decisions about their own security, while systemic safeguards provide a layer of protection against even the most sophisticated attacks. Moreover, what evidence does my opponent cite to support the claim that pervasive surveillance stifles democratic discourse and social progress? Isn't it more likely that such concerns are rooted in outdated notions of secrecy rather than any actual impact on free expression?
While my opponent suggests that we can have both robust privacy protections and strong cybersecurity measures through education and systemic safeguards, I argue that prioritizing security over privacy often leads to unintended consequences that undermine individual autonomy and democratic principles. Firstly, the focus on collective safety frequently results in policies that erode personal freedoms under the guise of protecting individuals from cyber threats. For example, extensive surveillance programs purportedly aimed at enhancing cybersecurity have been shown to infringe upon civil liberties by monitoring citizens' online activities without clear justification or oversight. This overreach can create a culture of constant suspicion and mistrust, where privacy is seen as something to be earned rather than an inherent right. Secondly, while educating individuals on cybersecurity best practices is crucial, it does not address the systemic risks posed by centralized data storage and control mechanisms. Large-scale breaches at major corporations or government agencies highlight how aggregated personal information can become a prime target for cybercriminals. Trusting these entities with vast amounts of sensitive user data inherently increases risk, as even well-intentioned security measures may be insufficient against sophisticated attacks. Moreover, the argument that we should balance privacy and collective safety overlooks the fundamental difference between voluntary actions, like individuals practicing good cybersecurity hygiene, and mandated protections, such as comprehensive privacy regulations. Voluntary practices can vary widely in effectiveness among different users, whereas robust privacy laws set enforceable standards for data handling across industries. This regulatory framework not only protects individual rights but also establishes a level playing field that encourages innovation while maintaining user trust. In essence, prioritizing security over privacy often leads to policies and technologies that prioritize mass surveillance and centralized control of personal information, which can have chilling effects on free expression and democratic participation online. While it is important to enhance cybersecurity measures through education and systemic protections, the core value of individual autonomy protected by strong privacy safeguards should remain paramount in our digital age. Ultimately, a balanced approach requires placing greater emphasis on protecting individuals' rights to control their own data rather than relying solely on collective safety measures that may ultimately compromise those very same freedoms.
I understand my opponent's concerns about the erosion of personal freedoms and democratic principles in the name of security, but I firmly believe that these risks are overstated. The examples they cite, extensive surveillance programs infringing upon civil liberties, are indeed troubling, but do not necessarily follow from prioritizing collective safety. In fact, robust cybersecurity measures can often be designed to protect individual rights while still enhancing overall security. For instance, encryption technologies can safeguard sensitive information without compromising anonymity or free speech. Moreover, many countries have implemented data protection laws that balance national security interests with individual privacy protections. My opponent claims that a focus on collective safety leads to policies that undermine individual autonomy, but this assumes an either-or dichotomy between security and freedom. In reality, we can strive for both by implementing targeted solutions like secure authentication protocols and regular system updates. Ultimately, I think it's naive to assume that our online activities will remain completely private even if we prioritize anonymity over collective safety. Cyber threats evolve constantly, and new vulnerabilities emerge all the time. By acknowledging this risk and taking proactive steps to mitigate it through education and systemic safeguards, we can create a safer digital landscape where individuals feel empowered rather than powerless against cyber predators. So let me reiterate, security trumps privacy because it protects us from real-world consequences that threaten our well-being and livelihoods every day. We owe it to ourselves and future generations to take responsibility for securing our own digital lives, rather than relying solely on government or corporate guarantees of anonymity.
While my opponent argues that robust cybersecurity measures can protect individual rights while enhancing overall security, I maintain that prioritizing privacy is essential for preserving human dignity and fostering democratic progress in our digital age. Firstly, encryption technologies and data protection laws are indeed important tools in safeguarding personal information. However, these technical solutions alone do not address the systemic issues arising from pervasive surveillance policies often justified under the banner of collective safety. Extensive monitoring programs can still infringe upon civil liberties even with strong cryptographic protections in place. The chilling effect on free speech and self-censorship remains a significant concern when individuals feel constantly watched by governments or corporations, regardless of technical safeguards. Secondly, while examples of troubling surveillance practices may not be universal, they highlight the inherent risks associated with prioritizing security over privacy. History has shown that well-meaning initiatives aimed at enhancing collective safety can evolve into mechanisms for mass surveillance and control. This dynamic shifts the balance from individual autonomy to state or corporate oversight, ultimately undermining democratic values. Furthermore, robust privacy protections are foundational in fostering an environment where people feel safe to express themselves freely without fear of retribution or misuse. This is critical not just for personal well-being but also for societal progress through open dialogue and innovation. When individuals know their data remains private and secure, they are more likely to engage actively online, contributing positively to democratic discourse. In conclusion, while cybersecurity measures are vital in protecting against digital threats, prioritizing privacy ensures a healthier balance between individual freedoms and collective safety. It safeguards the essence of human dignity by allowing people to live authentically without constant surveillance or fear of consequences. Therefore, it is more important for society as a whole to prioritize privacy over security to preserve democratic values and promote genuine progress in our interconnected world.